Have you ever wanted to command mythical creatures to fight by your side in Final Fantasy XIV? That's the essence of Summoner, right? But lately, something feels missing. While current Summoner might have some seriously cool summons, but do they even feel like summons? Because to me, they feel more like flashy fireworks than loyal companions. They pop in, they play their animations, and then disappear. Which made me ask myself, why do they not feel like summons? What is missing? What are the core elements that define a true summon or companion gameplay? But before we get into the answers to these questions, allow me to briefly introduce myself. Hi, I'm Kiva. I've been playing this game for some time. I came for the rating but stayed for the community. This game has been such a big part of my life that I don't think I will ever stop playing it, and I think it's safe to say that I will always love this game. But some of the best experiences I've ever had in this game have been raiding as a summoner. It doesn't come as a surprise that the guy who loves strategy and companionship in games would choose the summoner class as his main. But the sad thing is that the current version of Summoner lacks both those things. And to me, Summoner went from being a complex, very enjoyable pet class to I'm filling for a group but I don't want to use my brain so I'll pick this class. But why does the current iteration fail to capture the companion feel that defines a true Summoner class? What are the missing elements? Well, one of the core elements of any summoning or companion class is that the majority of its gameplay focuses on the companions rather than the character. At its heart, a summoner isn't just a damage dealer. They are a master of conjuration and a commander of powerful creatures. The core fantasy revolves around building a bond with your summoned beings, utilizing their unique strengths, and coordinating with them in combat. The core gameplay should revolve around the summoned creatures. That's the expected summoner experience players look forward to before trying it out. But in the current version of Summoner, the majority of the gameplay ends up revolving around the character rather than the summons, which is probably the most important element of a summoner feel that the job has lost over multiple expansions. We can see another example of shifting the focus from companion to character if we look at the changes made to Summoner's raid buff, Searing Light. In 6.1, they made it so that it comes from the character instead of the pet. And the reason for that is because during the raids P1 to P4S, there were instances where because your carbuncle follows you as you're doing mechanics, sometimes your raid buff wouldn't reach all your teammates. That happened to me mostly in phase 2 of P4S, in Act 2 and 4 specifically, but it didn't take long for most people to realize that all you had to do to solve that was to pre-position your pet before using Searing Light, which could be macroed, so you basically had to press one extra button as your 2 minutes were coming up, and you would cover your entire team every time. But this was at the time when their approach towards fixing these issues was to require less effort so that all players are consistent with it, which technically worked. So not only did they move it to the character and make it an instant cast, but they also doubled its radius. But while this approach did fix the consistency issue across all players, it completely removed the need to moving your pet. And the last reason to use pet orders. There is no use at all for these anymore on Summoner, because the only thing that comes from your carbuncle now is your personal shield, which you never have to move your pet for, making your carbuncle basically no different from a visual effect attached to your character, and shifting the focus further towards the character rather than the summons. And with the carbuncle not feeling like a companion, this leads us to the second core element of a summoner gameplay, and that is persistent summon. Having a persistent summon reinforces the fantasy of commanding powerful creatures by, well, allowing you to command those powerful creatures. Being able to position, heal, and utilize your creature's abilities further emphasized your role as the master of those creatures. Compared to the current version where it just plays an animation and then goes away, you have no control over your summon. Having a persistent summon also goes hand in hand with another element of the companion class gameplay, and that is bond and partnership. When a summon persists beyond just being a short-term ability, we tend to invest more emotionally in it. This investment comes from the time spent summoning and maintaining that creature. In combat, you rely on your summons for support, damage, or utility. At the same time, the summon relies on you. It can't do things on its own. After long periods of time of going through various challenges together, this shared journey creates a sense of partnership between the player and their summon. Even something as little as moving my pet pet to the boss every pull was making me feel like I use my summons to deal damage, that I am playing the summoner class. Not to mention having to maintain it or reposition it mid-fight. It created some sort of bond with my pets, at least for me, but with no persistent summons and no control over them, that element is gone as well. The last element of a summoner gameplay that I want to talk about is choosing from options. This is something that we've also seen with the fairies for Scholar, where each fairy had their own unique abilities that you could choose from based on the situation. You could choose between summoning Eos or Selene, but eventually they gave them both the same abilities and removed Selene, reducing your options down to 1. Now, for Scholar, I guess I can see the reason behind that, but for Summoner, it's a core element that it must have in my opinion. Summoners often have a variety of creatures to choose from, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. The more summons you could choose for different situations, the more you feel like a summoner. And even though in 14's old Summoner, it pretty much got narrowed down to use Ifrit for single target, so in raids, trials, dungeon bosses, use Garuda for AoE, so trash mobs and certain ad phases, use Titan for solo content like Fates, MSQ because it can tank. Despite being simplified to that degree, summoning different companions based on the situation, each with different abilities, made it feel a lot more like a summoner class than going through one rigid rotation all the time in every situation. I remember a time when, during dungeons, if the tank disconnects, the rest of the group immediately looked at you since you had a pet that can tank. You'd summon Titan and get things back on track. Of course it doesn't go as fast as with a tank player, but it gets the job done. And it made you feel useful. It's like, oh, we got a problem here? All right, let me open my book of summoning, by the way, see if I have a pet that can help us. What do you know? I have a pet that can specifically tank. Even in main cities, you'd see summoners running around with different summons out. You see someone with Titan, you're like, oh, that person must have been doing some solo content. You see someone who switches to Garuda, you're like, oh, about to enter a dungeon. Like, even for people who did not play summoner, it felt more like an actual summoner. Even something as little as that was adding more immersion to the game world, and especially to the summoner job. But anyways, those are the main elements that I wanted to discuss in today's video. I'm sure there are more elements that could be said, like for example having pet health bars instead of them being invincible, untargetable visual effect. I think having some level of stress over protecting your companion is important. Like for example, if you ignored your pet and it died, you lose a bit of DPS, which isn't significant, but if you'd like to become better, then you should keep an eye on it. Just add something challenging in a way that fits Summoner. Having zero drawbacks for completely forgetting about your summons on a class that's called Summoner just doesn't make too much sense to me. Makes it feel more character focused. Feels like going through a rotation like any other job. But this is just like off the top of my head. Like there's so much to talk about. The problem is that this subject is connected to many big topics like old Summoner versus new Summoner, harder game versus easier game, this is better, no this is worse. All that is a very big subject that I'm not trying to get into in today's video, not even for Summoner. The point of this video is not old Summoner versus new Summoner, but more like, is current Summoner even a Summoner? It does not feel like one to me. The reason I'm comparing it to the old version is to show that if the devs made it feel like a companion class before, they can do it again. But I hope it doesn't go back to the old version itself. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're enjoying current Summoner, then good for you. In fact, I'm happy you're enjoying Final Fantasy XIV. I've always been a Final Fantasy nerd, and I'm glad to see more people hopping on the train. We all play video games to have fun anyway. Glad to hear that you are. It's just that for me, Summoner died in Endwalker. I still enjoy the game overall though, and I can't wait till Dawntrail. Anyways, in conclusion, does this look cooler than this? Abso-freaking-lutely. But this lasts about 5 seconds, and after a while you got bored of that animation and most likely shrunk its size at some point. Now it's like background noise for you, you completely ignore it, and if you're like me, you went as far as turning off its visual effect so you can see the AoEs on the ground. While this is persistent, you can interact with it, heal it, position it, and it feels more like something you summoned than this does in my personal opinion. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this this video. I've seen a couple of people make videos about what changes they'd like to see to their main jobs in Dawntrail, so I thought I'd make my own. My hope for it in Dawntrail is to feel more like the master of powerful creatures, to have the gameplay that you'd expect the companion-focused class in the MMO to have, and not by changing it back to how it was, but making something new. Summoner is such an interesting concept where the sky is the limit, and I do believe in the devs. If anything, Yoshi P's recent statement proves that they see the situation the same way we do, and they listen to our feedback. So even if nothing changes in Dawntrail, I still have hopes for the future. That being said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, have fun, and I'll catch you later.